So today I'm going to focus on hints of riches old and new in the poem, that first stanza that Fenn writes leading into the 9 clues, where he said the first clues begin at where warm waters halt. The reason why I'm going to focus on hints of riches old and new is because I believe the first stanza is all context. It's what you fit the poem into in order to find the treasure, and it helps you understand what clues are relevant and what's not, what information to weed out, and really where to focus. So how good is this? Fenn puts a line in the poem that says hints of riches old and new. He tells us that there's 9 clues in the poem and that there are hints scattered throughout the book. But in the poem right in front of us is a line that says hints of riches old and new. It's the only place where it actually mentions hints and then a little bit of context behind that. That is his sign, his way of embedding a hint and a little bit of direction for the context of where we should be searching in the poem, and it's actually right in front of us. It's perfect as far as how Fenn thinks. Fenn has said don't ignore the nouns. So in going through the poem, not only are there 9 clues, but there's a lot of surrounding information built around that, a framework to the poem that includes several nouns. One of those being riches. And not only did he say not to ignore the nouns, but he actually mentioned that there's a key word. By including riches into your solve, it not only helps you focus on a specific category if you decide whatever riches is. In my case, I've decided that means not only the riches of the treasure, but Richard Wetherill and his dual gravestones. That actually could be considered a keyword too, because as soon as you consider that word, it defines the search area. And for me, in my case, I've chose riches to represent Richard Wetherill. He has the dual gravestones, which I think fits beautifully into the case of plurals, riches, as well as the more obvious meaning of riches being the treasure as someone finds it, riches new and old. So I think it's pretty neat. It actually defines your search within the storyline of someone else's life. And in Richard Wetherill's case, he's a perfect candidate to be an inspiration and not a mentor, but somewhat of a hero to Fenn. He started out as a rancher, stumbled across some ruins, and ended up dedicating the rest of his life to archaeology and studying the past of the Native Americans in the Southwest region. And a lot of people consider him to be the father of Southwest archaeology. So for better or for worse, he actually was a catalyst to making a lot of those discoveries. The other thought I had about the keyword piece was that if there's a word in the poem that can be a key, as in a key to the map, I think that would be interesting. I haven't been able to go into detail on that or find any in the context of my solve, but that might help someone down the road. So if you find a word that can actually fit as a key to the map. I did something interesting this week, which was to look into people on YouTube that are looking for arrowheads, and it is crazy. I feel like I clicked with the kind of feeling that Fenn had when he found his first arrowhead. There are people out there that dedicate their time to walking up and down creeks or talking with people that own agricultural land so that they can actually go out and try to find artifacts, and you can see the energy that they get from discovering something and actually understand the time that they put into it by the way that they talk about the artifacts they find. They know what they are, they know some history behind them, they know what kind of artifacts they are, what they were used for, who used them. It was pretty neat, and I get how much of a kick, how much of a rush that could be, and why Fenn ended up choosing to dedicate his whole life to archaeology and understanding native cultures, being able to excavate at San Lazaro. And then a throwback to Richard Wetherill and why he did the same thing. He came across Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde. Of course he was going to dedicate his life to finding all of the sites that he had heard about from his native friends. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go check out the Richard Wetherill Cemetery in Chaco Canyon. It's pretty neat. You can drive right up to a parking lot that's about 500 feet away from the cemetery itself. The fence around the cemetery is a couple hundred feet, and they note that. They say that specifically, the distance from the parking lot to the cemetery and then the loop around the cemetery. They note those distances, and it's almost perfectly in line with what Fenn has said is the distance that people have been within the treasure. Now, I'm not telling anyone to go dig up that cemetery at all. I wouldn't suggest it. Obviously, it's in a national monument. It's disturbing a cemetery. However, the similarities are striking. I believe that if you consider the line in the poem, hints of riches new and old, in that first stanza as context for the solve within the poem, It does a couple of things for you. The entire memoir, The Thrill of the Chase, is a series of tributes to family members, people that he's discovered, like the French soldier but didn't know, interactions that he's had with interesting people like Olga, and their eventual death. Each one is kind of bringing attention to that person and how significant their life really was to him. He's someone that changed our understanding of the Native Americans. He pushed back the timeline for how long they were here and exactly how developed they were as a culture, but he's not a subject that's taught in schools. And he's that exact Indiana Jones type character that Fenn would admire. The other part, the second part that line accomplishes, Hints of Riches Old and New, is that if you're looking for Where Warm Waters Halt or Home of Brown, it's so hard to define what that individual correct starting point would be or what those landmarks are. But if you have a specific set of hints that you're going through, it instantly snaps into focus exactly which one is the right one and puts you in a point where you can go through Where Warm Waters Halt, Take It in the Canyon Down, and know that it's the right one according to that context. I think that he's done that with that line, Hints of Riches Old and New, and I think that he's done it in a way that is right in front of us, but it's hard to see. It's a play on words. It's exactly how Fenn would have done it, and how perfect is that for Fenn the Trickster? So how did Fenn do this, right? How did he pay tribute? I think he did it at the 2010 Richard Wetherill tribute when there was a remembrance ceremony for Richard Wetherill.